Lab number 260. So we continue development of our hybrid messenger application, and right now we will try to help this user of the app to understand how much time will he need to get to the location. So basically what we will do is we will use Google API to calculate the distance from his position to required location based on this address line. And we will also calculate time and traffic. So we'll display distance and time and traffic that is needed for him to get to that location. Basically, if he will see that, for example, there is some other item, maybe for other time, other delivery time as within the suitable distance or within a suitable time of arrival, he can try to call to that guy or girl and say, hey, maybe we can do it earlier or something like that. So basically we'll start with going to Google distance matrix website that will show how to use that API. And the idea is pretty simple. Let's get on the home page first. So we just need to call the specific URL, providing the origin means where we are now or from where we want to calculate distance. We can specify several ones just by adding this character in between. And then destinations. And again, we can provide several destinations. And the final thing that we need to do is to add a key here. So this key is actually based on the kind of thing that you will use to call this API. So if you're using the browser, you need to call here with providing browser key. But because we will be calling this URL from adapter from our mobile first platform server, this key is actually the server key, the same one that we are using to delivering push. So we will just reuse that key. So response that we will get contains rows, well, actually only one, inside which we have our elements. And if we will provide several origins, then we will have several rows. But in our case, we will have only one origin on only our location. So we'll have row with one element inside. And inside those elements, there will be a reply for each provided destination. Like starting with San Francisco, for example, the distance is this one. The time needed is this one. So if we want to see the time and traffic, we need to check the other URL, travel time, which is different from previous one by two things. First, we need to provide departure time there. And basically, that departure time is just time in seconds. That we can get by using date now, and then we need to provide traffic model best guess, just based on one of the options that traffic model can have, but we will use the best guess. And then in reply we will have almost the same, plus we will have something called duration and traffic, and then we can combine this value with this value to display, for example, difference. And let's imagine we can display the time needed in different colors. Like if there is traffic, we can display it in red. If there is no traffic, we can display it in green, for example. So this is the basically domain that we will use. And let's start by creating the adapter. So for that, let's open the terminal and create our adapter. MFP def adapter create. So let's call it something like Google API adapter. It will be HTTP adapter. The group will be com hybrid, just the same one as we used all the time. And basically, it will create the Google API adapter that we will work with. So now we can go to our editor. And from here, we can open the Google API adapter folder. So first we will start with adapter.xml. We need to change this domain to maps Google API. So this is HTTPS, so port is the same. We can keep it as is. Next thing that we will need to do here is to define a procedure. Let's call it something like get distance, for example. And one more thing that we will do is we will define some kind of property that we will be able to configure through operations console. So let's call this property something like API key. So the goal is that there will be a property some called API key available for you to modify the console. So once you will find something like Google API key inside the console, you will be able to enter any value, and then we can take this value and work with it inside our adapter. So let's also provide here default value for this API key, and my default value will be the same that I used for send-in push, so I can find it in the console. So hybrid messenger, then push. And here is my server API key. Of course, you can also copy it from the developer console or Google API console, it depends how you're calling it. But anyway, this is the key that we need to use for this procedure get distance. So now it's time to actually create that procedure. So I will just leave this get feed and remove everything else from this file and rename get feeds to get distance. So let's pass inside something like opt variable, meaning something like options. The method will be get returned content type expected as JSON. Then we need to construct the path that we will call, and finally we will execute that one. Before we will be able to construct the path, we will need to take the API key that we defined as the property, so we can do it like that. We can just name the property the same way, the variable the same name, and then use the server-side API like MFP server, and then we can get property value and providing the API key as the name of that property that we are trying to take value from. So now let's go to the path. So first of all, we will need to construct these maps, then API distance matrix, then we will need this JSON with question mark, and this will be a first part of our path. The second part will be just those options that we will get as an input. And finally, we will also need to provide the key here and the value of this API key variable. Basically, that's it. This is how our path will look like. So now we can save this file and navigate inside this Google API adapter folder and do MFP dev adapter build first. It looks like I forgot to close property tag. 1 second. Yes, exactly. So you can either do a closing in a separate tag or just do this character and try again. Yeah, and of course display should be display name and not just display. Sorry for that also. Okay, so now when we built our adapter, we can deploy it, and the next step for us to do will be to test our adapter, so we can display, for example, a result that we can get from Google API in Swagger. So for that, let's go back to our console, navigate back, refresh the page to see our newly deployed adapter. Yes, we see Google API adapter right here. So this is our custom parameter called Google API key that we defined. So right from the console, we can replace it. Of course, resources, let's use Swagger docs and try to call that. Okay, so now here we can specify the input parameters like it was before. So we need first origins. Let's have something like Prague. And then destinations, we can specify something like Berlin here, and we also need to authorize ourselves in scope. By default, we have default scope if we're specifying nothing, so let's try with default scope. Yep, we are seeing the results. Let's, by the way, change this procedure to be secured with the same scope as we used before. So as you remember, it called restricted data, just like that. And let me again do the build and deploy. Cool. So now actually inside our console, we should be able to see that this resource is secured with restricted data scope. Yep, so next step for us is actually to perform the same call from our application. And for that, basically, we will use the existing provider. In our case, it's called schedule service. It's working on the same page. And together with the load function, we will have something like calculate, for example. So we can copy actually this load function and pass it again. And then just rename to calc. Schedule service calc for login, and then instead of data, let's have something like distance. And of course, we will need to rename everywhere. So here will be also distance. And we will need to define this variable somewhere on the top. And just like that. So now we need to rename the adapter. So in our case, it's Google API adapter, and the function called gets distance. Just like that. Before doing the call, we actually need to provide additional parameters. That can be done with data requests and then using the mobile first platform client-side API set query parameters. So set query parameter in case we have only one, or parameters in case we have many. So we will have only one, but it will be quite big. So this set query parameter should look like this. So first we are saying that it will be params, and then we actually providing those. So construction should look like this. First single mark, then the double mark that will be inside, because as you remember, we have our specific characters in address, specific to Czech language, because those addresses are in Prague. And then inside we will actually have our parameters parsed into. So let's call the variable something like Google params, just like that. And of course, in order to use that, we will need to define this variable. So Google params will be equal to, first we are starting with origins. So origins should be provided as an input. Let's have a variable, something like origin, for example. Then we need to provide destinations, just like that. And with the destinations, it's more complicated. It's not our geolocation, it's all that list provided as a set of addresses. So let's have destinations here provided as an input to our calc. So destinations just will be an input parameter. Plus, we will need to provide departure time if we want to calculate also the duration in traffic. Departure time, like that. So this departure time will be just current time, so we will define a variable something like current time. And finally, we will finish with traffic model, and this traffic model will be equal to best guess, like that. So now we need to start defining those variables. So we'll start with current time, which means current time, and we can get that time in seconds by just saying date now. We will get the required format of that. We can just check the login just to make sure that it will be as expected. Just like that. Then origin, ideally we should install the Google plugin for geolocation and get the current location, but because you will be running your labs all over the world and I don't want you to go into fixing the geolocation for emulator, we'll just emulate our current geolocation with the variable origin. And just provide the following. So 50.019.275, and the second is 14.43.74.24. So that geolocation is inside Prague, somewhere in between of all those addresses that we have, and it will calculate distance not more than 15 kilometers in between of those addresses. So what is left is basically these destinations that we will need to calculate somehow. Let's also do logging of our Google parameters, so we will know what's happening. Like that, and we will also need to work with response. It won't be delivery, so as you remember, we have rows inside, and because we have only one origin, so it's always the first row, so row 0, and then we have elements inside which we have our response. So this is what will be logged, and this is what we need to assign to our distance that will be returned in response to this function call. So next step for us is actually to work on TS file to perform this call, and in order to perform this call we need firstly to calculate destinations. So let's create some kind of array here. Let's call it geos, and by default it will be equal to null. And what we will do each time we are going inside this for each to actually check the time, we will also push the address to this array. So it will look like geos existing one plus new things from results, our current index, and then basically the address. Plus we need to pass this character to add several addresses. So this will be the final code. So as you remember in Google example, between each address we need to add this character, just this line, so we will do the same. So after we push those geos inside the geos variable, we have a list of geos that we can right away pass inside our service. So let's call it somewhere here. This shadow, then calc, then passing those geos inside, and basically the callback, let's have something like results in response as always. And what we will do with it, we will need actually to put the result into each entry of our array, of our delivery array. So we will again need to use the same construction. We can copy it from above, like that. So we need two things here. First, we will need to put something like distance. So this delivery, basically index, and then distance, it will be equal to our results index dot distance dot text. This is the first step. So as you remember, distance in text means adding km at the end. For example, 68.8 kilometers. So this is the first step. And the second thing, we will also need to check duration and traffic. And ideally, we will need to specify if there is a traffic or not. So for that, we will define a variable, let's call it traffic. And in case the traffic will be true, then the text will be in red color. In case the traffic will be false, then the text will be in green color. So in order to check that, let's implement a simple if. So what we will be checking is if results duration and traffic value is bigger than just duration value, meaning if the time that is needed to go inside the traffic, this one is bigger than this one. So if results index, of course, duration and traffic dot value is bigger than results, again, index dot duration dot value. So in case it is, first of all, we will say that this delivery, of course, index traffic will be equal to true, and second option, it will be equal to false. And the second thing is that we will assign the value of this delivery, of course, index, and then let's have something like duration to duration in traffic text. And in case it's not bigger, then this will be just duration text, not in traffic. Just like that. That's it. Now we can save the shadow TS, and the final step will be to look on the HTML file. So let's use here something like Ion avatar to display styling in the way how avatar list was displayed. within Ionic, but instead of image, we will just have here firstly displayed our item duration. And then on the second line, let's have P here. On the second line, we will display item distance. So plus we will need to add those styling. So just as we did it before, style in this time it will be color. So in case item traffic will be true, then we will basically display text in red color. Otherwise, we will display this duration in green color, just like that. So let's save this file, wait until our live reload will finish loading our page and see how it will be looking like. Okay, not exactly as expected, but at least we have those timings and we have distance. Everything seems to be in red, so it seems like something wrong with that traffic variable, or it's always true. Okay, so let's start with working with those avatar. Let's try item left. It should help us, and let's also take a look on how we define the traffic variable. Yeah, I said in both cases true. So in the second one, of course, it should be false. Good. So actually it's working now. We have something in red, something in green. Now it's busy time, traffic jam, so everything, almost everything is in red, which is not nice, but this is life. So what else we can do here is we can add a bit of styling just to make the spacing here. So let's define some classes in HTML. So here's something like raw time, and then something like, well, how to name it? Let's call it distance. Just like that. And now we can define that in a CSS file. So we will start with distance. So let's have text again equal to center first of all. And what else? Well, we can say that raw time should be also equal to center for text elegant. And let's try to add margin top in both cases for 3 pixels. Just like that. Plus, let's also work with the address. I remember that address wasn't looking really cool. So I mean just providing the text overflow settings to ellipsis, so it will cut with 3 dots what won't be showing on the screen, and then of course overflow X should be hidden, otherwise we won't see that. And because we changed the address, let's also assign a class here, just like that. Looks like it was not applied. Let me check. Okay, the raw time was specified differently, like this. What's wrong with the distance? Should be fine. Okay, let's check once again. Okay, let's check what's wrong here. Okay, it looks like we need an important flag. Okay. Like that, and let's check the HTML file. Yes, now everything should be correct. Okay, so now everything looks cool, and basically that's all. For this lab, we are finishing our work, and we'll continue development in other labs, but it will be mostly focused on quality assurance and deployment, because the main phase, the development of the app itself, is finished. We have the schedule working. We have the external application ability to able to open, meaning for navigation or for calling the phone number. We are also calculating the time needed to get to destination with the distance using Google API. We're getting the list of schedule for delivery items using the cloud and database. As you remember, we also able to get the rating of those guys. By the way, you see that I was talking for 60 seconds and time that token was valid expired, so I need to enter again the username and the password. So I'm seeing also the rating, which is get again from random user me service through adapter. We have working use with JSON store, and we were testing push also. So basically the main part is finished. Now it's only about quality assurance and deployment. Thank you.